There are many reasons for going to Mass. First, the Mass is the very best form of prayer. At Mass we have a unique way to talk to God that we will not find anywhere else. When we are able to receive Holy Communion, we receive God within us. And just after doing so is an especially good time to pray. Also, when we listen carefully to the readings, God will offer us help and direction, and the Mass will also give us strength to try to live our lives well. Another reason to go to Mass is that every time we do so, we witness the sacrifice Jesus made when he died on the cross to save us. So do we not owe it to God to go to Mass? Moreover, we go because Jesus asked us to do so at the Last Supper when he said, "Do this in memory of me." Finally, we go every Sunday, the day of the resurrection, because the Church requires us to, unless illness or some other insurmountable difficulty prevents us. The Holy Church knows that this obligation of love will express our priority in life and help us on the road to heaven.
The most important thing is to always plan when you're going to Mass as the focal point of your weekend or your Sunday, and work everything else in around that. Some families will always go to the same Mass time, but perhaps that's not always possible. So again, having that time and working out from that. Then making it special, having a special maybe Sunday lunch or an evening meal, and maybe having a treat, an extra special pudding. These are ways to make it special and keep that as something that the children look forward to.
One way we make Sunday special is by ensuring we're all dressed up nice. We put an effort into our clothing, or we have a couple of traditions of doing pancake on Sunday morning, getting dressed up nice for church, doing a special meal later on in the day. Normally it's the roast.
Either we'll have that here or we'll go to family, we'll spend it with other family. My parents, for example, are quite close by, we might spend some time with them, the rest of my brothers, to just try and encourage that as a day that we spend together, really, with family.
And of course it's always centered around going to church together with the children.
When our children were little, we always went to Mass first thing in the morning, and on the way back we would stop off at a little cafe and allow them to choose something as a special treat, no matter how well they'd behaved or not during Mass, just to mark the fact that actually it was the Lord's Day. And then of course food was always a really big thing, a really special meal and a really nice dessert.
In the first part of the Mass, sometimes called the Liturgy of the Word, or traditionally the Mass of Catechumens, we hear readings from the sacred scriptures, from the Old Testament, where God's people were waiting for the coming of the Messiah. We have Psalms, which are the hymn book of ancient Israel, prayers of praise from the Old Testament. Jesus would have prayed the Psalms when he was growing up, and also quoted from them a lot in his teaching. Sometimes we have a reading from the New Testament, either from the Acts of the Apostles or the first leaders of the church, such as St. Paul, teaching the early church how to live and love like Jesus, the Lord. The final reading is the most important one, from one of the four Gospels of the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John. In solemn Masses, the Gospel can be sung. The Gospel is Jesus speaking to us directly, often in his own words.
Mass every Sunday is a real priority for us. It's something that we always make sure that we do, at the very least on Sunday,
And of course every holiday of obligation and the special feast of the year.
But I think as Cecilia mentioned, it's about the day centering around the Mass. Everything we do is around the Mass. If we're going to go out, we plan where can we go close to the Mass, what can we do, how can we integrate with our plans.
And if one kid is sick, one of us will go to Mass first and then the other will go later. So which will change a little bit the rhythm of the day, but there's no Sunday without going to Mass.
There's so many wonderful resources when you come into Mass. And we always brought in books, but not just everyday books. We had a pile of special books at home that we took to Mass with us that were all about Jesus and the saints, colouring books that you can get now that are just so wonderful, to keep the children occupied, but to always keep their focus on Jesus and his love for them.
It can be very difficult with children if they're misbehaving, but persevere. Really, the grace that they get from being there will last them a lifetime, even if it's at our cost of not being able to focus and concentrate. I remember an occasion when my daughter was playing up a little bit. I was there at daily Mass and I took her out and thought, oh, I shouldn't come back in again. And our lovely sister in the parish said to me afterwards, bring her back in, nobody minds. You know, she needs to be there, you need to be there. And I was always very grateful, and I remember that now to this day.
A bell can be rung at Mass, usually at the time of the consecration, when the most sacred action of the Mass takes place. It calls for our attention and for us to focus. At the consecration, the priest repeats the words and actions of Jesus at the Last Supper. He takes the bread and says, "This is my body, which will be given up for you." Then he holds the host up high, showing it to all and offering it to God as Christ was offered in sacrifice on the cross. The bells are rung. It is a time to focus with profound reverence and respect. The congregation is kneeling in silent prayer. The priest then takes the chalice of wine and speaks the words of Jesus once again. "This is the chalice of my blood." The priest holds the chalice high, offering it to God, and the bells are rung. The wine has become Jesus' precious blood, just as the bread had become his body. Jesus is really present and offers himself for us, as he did 2,000 years ago on the cross. The Mass gets its name from the final words of the service that the priest says, which are in Latin, "Ite missa est," which means, "Go, you are sent." The Mass takes its name from this final phrase, which points to its key purpose, namely, to equip us to go into the world as Jesus' true disciples, to spread the gospel to others, and to live out the life of Christ whom we have received in our everyday lives.